The sound of hooves pounding against frozen earth jolted Xavier Yates from his morning routine of stoking the fire. And when he opened the door to investigate, an orc messenger collapsed at his feet with blood seeping through the leather armor at her side. Xavier dropped to his knees instantly, years of battlefield training overriding his shock. The orc was female, her green skin pale with blood loss, small tusks protruding from her lower lip as she struggled to breathe. Her pointed ears were pierced with silver rings, and her black hair was braided tight against her skull in the warrior style. She clutched a sealed scroll case against her chest with fingers that were starting to lose their grip. "Easy," Xavier said, reaching for her shoulder. "I've got you." Her eyes snapped open, golden and fierce despite the pain etched across her angular features. "The valley," she rasped. "Raiders. 3 days." Her fingers loosened on the scroll case and Xavier caught it before it could fall into the mud. "Village council must reach." "The council is 2 days' ride from here," Xavier said, already assessing her wound. An arrow had pierced her side, probably puncturing something vital from the amount of blood. "You won't make it another mile." "Must," she insisted, trying to push herself up. Her arm buckled immediately, and Xavier caught her before her face hit the ground. "What you must do is let me stop that bleeding before you die on my doorstep," Xavier said firmly. He was already pulling her arm over his shoulder, hauling her dead weight toward the door. She was heavy with muscle and armor, but Xavier had carried wounded soldiers before. His small farmhouse was isolated, built on the edge of the forest where he could avoid the questions of townsfolk about why a former captain of the border guard chose to live alone with his goats and his ghosts. He kicked the door wider and dragged her inside, laying her on the worn rug before the fire. She groaned, her hand going to her side where blood was now flowing freely. Xavier grabbed his knife and began cutting away the leather straps of her armor. "The scroll," she gasped. "Read it. Warn them." "I'll read it after I make sure you live to deliver it yourself," Xavier muttered, pulling away the armor to reveal the wound beneath. The arrow had gone clean through, which was good. The amount of blood was not. He grabbed clean cloth from his shelf and pressed it hard against the entry wound. She hissed in pain, her hand shooting up to grab his wrist with surprising strength. "You do not understand. The Black Claw clan, they come for the valley. 300 warriors." Xavier's blood went cold. The Black Claw were the most brutal of the orc raiding clans, known for taking no prisoners and burning everything in their path. If they were truly coming with 300 warriors, the scattered farms and small villages of the valley would be slaughtered before they could organize a defense. "How do you know this?" he asked, maintaining pressure on her wound even as his mind raced. Was of the Stone Fist clan," she said, her breathing labored. "We share territory borders with Black Claw. I heard their war chief speaking to his captains. They plan to strike when the new moon comes. They know the valley militia is small. Easy plunder, they said. Easy slaves." "Why would you warn us?" Xavier asked, reaching for more cloth as the first piece became soaked through. "Your people and mine have been killing each other for generations." Her golden eyes met his, and something fierce burned there despite her weakness. "Because I have seen what Black Claw does. They do not care if their victims are human or orc. They killed my sister's clan for refusing to join their raids. Children, elders, everyone." Her hand loosened on his wrist, falling back to the floor. "I could not stand by and let it happen again, even if the victims are human." Xavier held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you." He grabbed a needle and thread from his medical kit, the one he had kept from his army days. "This is going to hurt." "I am orc," she said with a ghost of pride. "I can bear pain." She did bear it, though her jaw clenched hard enough that Xavier worried about her tusks cutting into her lip. He worked quickly, stitching the exit wound first and then rolling her carefully to reach the entry point. She did not cry out, but her breathing became ragged and her skin grew clammy with shock. "What's your name?" Xavier asked as he worked, trying to keep her conscious. "Kara," she managed. "Of the Stone Fist clan. Or I was, before I chose to become traitor." "You're no traitor," Xavier said firmly. "You're trying to save lives. That takes more courage than following your clan into darkness." He finished the last stitch and bound her side with clean linen, wrapping it tight to slow the bleeding. "I'm Xavier. I was a captain in the border guard before I retired here." "I know," Kara said, surprising him. "That is why I came this way. I heard stories of the human captain who would not kill orc children when his commander ordered it. The one they called Soft Heart." Xavier's mouth twisted. "They called me worse than that after I refused that order." "But you did refuse," Kara said. Her eyes were starting to glaze with fever. "That is why I thought you might listen. Might help." Xavier grabbed a blanket and tucked it around her, then retrieved the scroll case from where it had fallen by the door. The seal was marked with the Stone Fist clan symbol, a closed fist carved into the wax. He broke it open and unrolled the parchment inside. The message was written in rough but readable human script, clearly penned by someone more used to orcish runes. It detailed everything Kara had told him and more. The Black Claw clan had been raiding supply caravans for months, building their strength. They had allied with two smaller clans, bringing their numbers to over 300. They planned to sweep through the valley in a coordinated attack, hitting the largest villages first to prevent any organized resistance, then moving through the farms one by one. The new moon was 3 days away. Xavier read it twice, his military mind automatically calculating response times and defensive positions. The valley had perhaps 60 able-bodied fighters if you counted every farmer who could hold a spear. They would be slaughtered, unless he could get word to Fort Clearwater. The fort was 5 days' hard ride to the north, home to 2 companies of professional soldiers. If he could reach them and convince the commander to send aid, they might stand a chance. But 5 days there and 5 days back meant the attack would happen before reinforcements could arrive. Unless the militia could hold out somehow, he looked down at Kara, who had finally lost consciousness. Her breathing was shallow but steady, her skin still too pale. Moving her would kill her for certain. But leaving her here while he rode for help meant she would be alone and defenseless if the farm was discovered. Xavier made his decision quickly. He was a soldier before he was a farmer, and soldiers did what was necessary. He spent the next hour in focused preparation. He gathered food and water, placing them within easy reach of where Kara lay. He stoked the fire high and stacked extra wood beside it. He left his spare knife on the floor next to her, within easy reach. Then he went to the small barn and saddled his horse, a sturdy mare who had carried him through 2 campaigns. Before he left, he knelt beside Kara and checked her bandages. Still holding. He left a note in case she woke, explaining where he had gone and that he would return as quickly as possible. The ride to Fort Clearwater was brutal. Xavier pushed his mare hard, stopping only to rest her for brief periods before mounting again. He rode through the night, through the next day, sleeping in the saddle when exhaustion threatened to pull him from the horse. He reached the fort at dawn of the second day, nearly falling from his mount as he hammered on the gates. Commander Garrett was a practical man who had served with Xavier years ago. He read the scroll with a deepening frown, then looked at Xavier with skeptical eyes. "An orc brought you this." "And you believe her?" "I do," Xavier said. "I saw her wound. She nearly died getting this information to us. No one would go through that for a lie. Or it's a trap, Garrett said. Draw our forces out into the valley, ambush us on the road. Then send scouts first, Xavier argued. But we can't ignore this. If she's telling the truth and we do nothing, hundreds of people will die. Garrett studied the scroll again, then Xavier's face. You're certain, on my life. You already gave up your career for your principles, Xavier, Garrett said, but there was no mockery in his voice. I suppose I can trust your judgment one more time. He called for his senior officers and began organizing the response. 2 companies would march within the hour, moving fast and light. Scouts would go ahead to verify the intelligence. Xavier would guide them back to the valley, though Garrett insisted he rest for a few hours first, or he would fall dead from his horse before they arrived. Xavier slept hard for 3 hours, then jolted awake with thoughts of Kara alone in his farmhouse. The companies were already forming up, 200 soldiers in disciplined ranks. Garrett himself would lead them, leaving only a skeleton garrison at the fort. The march back was faster with fresh horses, but it still took 4 days of hard riding. Xavier counted the hours obsessively, knowing the new moon was rising even as they raced south. Would they be too late? Would he return to find his farm burned and Kara dead? They reached the valley on the 4th night, spreading out to warn the scattered homesteads and gather the militia at the largest village. Xavier split from the main force and drove his exhausted horse toward his farm, his heart hammering as he crested the final hill. His farmhouse still stood, smoke rising from the chimney. Xavier nearly wept with relief. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, stumbling to the door and throwing it open. Kara was sitting up by the fire, wrapped in blankets, his spare knife held ready in her hand. Her golden eyes went wide when she saw him. "You came back," she said, and there was such surprise in her voice that Xavier felt something twist in his chest. "Of course I came back," he said, crossing the room in 3 strides. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering over her shoulders, not quite touching. "How are you? You should be lying down." "I am orc," she said with that same stubborn pride. "We heal quickly." But he could see the strain in her face, the way she held herself carefully to protect her wounded side. "Did you deliver the warning?" "Better," Xavier said. "I rode to Fort Clearwater. 2 companies of soldiers are arriving in the valley as we speak. We have a fighting chance now." Kara's eyes widened further. "You rode to the fort. That is 5 days away. How long have I been here?" 8 days, Xavier said. "I left you supplies and rode straight through. Commander Garrett believed me because of your message. He's gathering the militia now to prepare defenses." 8 days, Kara repeated softly. She looked around the small farmhouse as if seeing it for the first time. "You left your home undefended for 8 days, to help humans you do not know, because you believed an orc you had just met." "I believed you because what you did took courage," Xavier said, "and because I read the truth in your eyes when you spoke of your sister's clan." He finally let his hands rest on her shoulders just lightly. "I'm glad you're alive. I was afraid I would come back to find you gone." Something shifted in Kara's expression, a softening of the fierce warrior mask. "I would have died if you had not helped me. My clan, my former clan, they would say I am weak for accepting human aid, for betraying orc to save human lives." "Your clan is wrong," Xavier said firmly. "You're not weak. You're strong enough to do what's right even when it costs you everything." Kara's hand came up slowly, her rough fingers touching his bearded jaw with surprising gentleness. "You speak of strength and doing right, but you lost your military career for refusing to harm orc children. Who are you to lecture me about the price of principles?" Xavier found himself smiling despite the exhaustion that weighed on his bones. "I suppose we're both fools then." "Yes," Kara agreed, and the corner of her mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile. "We are both fools." The moment broke when they heard horses approaching. Xavier stood quickly, his hand going to his sword, but it was Commander Garrett and a small squad of soldiers. The commander dismounted and entered the farmhouse, his eyes immediately finding Kara. "This is your orc messenger," he asked Xavier. "This is Kara of the Stone Fist clan," Xavier said. "She's the one who brought the warning." Garrett studied Kara with the assessing eye of a veteran soldier. "Can you ride? I want you with the scouts when they verify your information about Black Claw positions." Kara pushed herself to standing, using the wall for support. Xavier immediately moved to help her, but she waved him off. "I can ride," she said. "And I can guide your scouts to where the Black Claw clans gather. They will be in the Red Stone Canyons to the east, preparing for their attack." "You're not strong enough yet," Xavier protested. "I am strong enough to do what must be done," Kara said, that fierce pride blazing in her eyes again. She looked at Garrett. "I will help you, but I ask something in return." "What?" Garrett asked warily. "After this is done, regardless of outcome, you allow me to leave freely." "No imprisonment, no punishment for being orc in human lands. I have betrayed my people to save yours. I can never return to them. I must make a new path." Garrett glanced at Xavier, then back to Kara. "Agreed. You help us verify and counter this threat, and you'll have safe passage anywhere in the valley. I'll even provide you with supplies." Kara nodded once sharply. "Then let us go. The new moon rises tonight. Black Claw will attack at dawn." The next hours were a blur of activity. Kara, despite her wound and Xavier's protests, climbed onto a horse and guided a squad of scouts toward the Red Stone Canyons. Xavier rode with them, refusing to leave her side even when Garrett suggested he should rest. They moved quietly through the forest, and as they neared the canyons, they began to see signs of the raiding party. Tracks, lots of them. Campsites hastily abandoned. The scouts spread out, confirming what Kara had told them. 300 orc warriors were indeed gathering in the canyons. They had built up supplies for a sustained campaign and were clearly preparing to move out. The scouts observed the camp from hiding, noting patrol patterns and leadership positions. Kara identified the Black Claw war chief by his distinctive skull-painted armor and provided insight into clan tactics and command structures. By the time they returned to the valley, Garrett had a complete picture of what they faced. He gathered his officers and the local militia leaders to plan their defense. "We can't meet them in open battle," Garrett said, studying the map spread across the table in the village hall. "They outnumber us and they're expecting easy targets, not organized resistance. We need to make them think they're getting what they want, then hit them hard when they're spread out and vulnerable." Kara leaned over the map, her finger tracing the main road through the valley. "Black Claw will send outriders to scout the largest villages first. When they report that the defenses are weak, the main force will split into 3 groups to attack multiple targets at once. That is their standard tactic. Then we give them what they expect," Xavier said, seeing where Kara's logic was leading. "We make the villages look undefended, maybe even stage a fake evacuation. When the outriders report back, the Black Claw will split their forces. And we ambush each group separately," Garrett finished, nodding approval. "We have the advantage of knowing their timing and tactics. We can position our forces to strike when they're most vulnerable." The plan came together quickly. The militia would stage a visible retreat, appearing to panic and flee into the forest. The professional soldiers would hide in prepared positions around 3 key villages. When the Black Claw forces split and moved in for what they thought would be easy plunder, they would instead find themselves surrounded by disciplined troops. Kara provided invaluable intelligence about orc fighting styles and clan hierarchies. "Kill the war chief first if you can," she said. Black Claw warriors are fierce, but they rely heavily on central command. If the war chief falls, they will break and scatter. Also, they despise perceived weakness. If you show fear, they will press harder. But if you stand firm and bloody them early, they will respect you as worthy opponents. They worked through the night, preparing defenses and positioning troops. Xavier found himself constantly glancing at Kara, worried she would collapse again from the strain. But she stood firm through the entire planning session, only sitting when she thought no one was watching. As dawn approached, Xavier pulled her aside. "You've done enough," he said quietly. "More than enough. You should rest, let your wound heal." "I will rest when this is done," Kara said. "Not before." "You're stubborn," Xavier said, but there was fondness in his voice. "I am orc," Kara replied, as if that explained everything. Then she hesitated, her golden eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much if I rest? You barely know me." Xavier found himself without a good answer. Why did he care? She had been a stranger who collapsed on his doorstep 8 days ago. But in that time, something had shifted in him. Her courage, her determination, the way she had sacrificed everything to do what she believed was right. It had touched something in him that had been dormant since he left the military. "I care because you're a good person," he said finally. "And good people are rare enough that we should take care of them when we find them." Kara's expression softened in that way it had before, the warrior mask slipping to reveal something more vulnerable beneath. "You are also a good person, Xavier Yates. Perhaps that is why I chose your door to collapse at. I knew the stories about you. Part of me hoped you would be the one to find me." Before Xavier could respond, a scout came running with news. The Black Claw outriders had been spotted approaching the valley. It was time. The battle, when it came, was brutal and efficient. The Black Claw outriders observed the seemingly panicked villagers fleeing into the forest and reported back exactly as predicted. The main orc force split into 3 groups and moved in to claim their easy victory. They found soldiers instead. The first group hit the northern village and ran straight into a wall of pikes held by disciplined infantry. The Black Claw warriors were caught in the narrow streets, unable to use their superior numbers effectively. Archers positioned on rooftops rained arrows down on them, while the infantry held the line. The second group attacked the eastern farms and found themselves caught in a pincer movement, as soldiers emerged from hiding in the forest on both sides. The fighting was fierce, but the Black Claw warriors were disorganized, expecting scattered farmers instead of coordinated military opposition. The third group, led by the war chief himself, struck at the central village where Garrett had positioned his best troops. The battle there was the hardest fought. The war chief was a massive orc in skull-painted armor, wielding a huge war axe with devastating effect. He cut through the first rank of soldiers before Garrett himself engaged him. Xavier fought in that central battle, his sword moving with the automatic precision of years of training. He stayed close to Kara, who had insisted on being present despite her wound. She had armed herself with a borrowed spear, and used it with the skill of a trained warrior, calling out warnings in Orcish that confused the Black Claw fighters and gave the human defenders precious seconds to react. When a Black Claw warrior broke through the line and charged directly at Kara, Xavier intercepted him with a desperate lunge. The two went down in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Xavier took a blow to the ribs that cracked something, but he managed to get his knife under the warrior's guard and into his throat. He rolled off the dying orc and saw Kara standing over him, her spear leveled at 2 more Black Claw warriors who had been moving to finish Xavier while he was down. She shouted something in Orcish, something harsh and commanding. The two warriors hesitated, clearly shocked to see one of their own kind defending a human. That hesitation cost them. Xavier surged to his feet and engaged one while Kara drove her spear into the other's leg, sending him sprawling. The fight was savage and close, but they prevailed, standing back to back as the battle raged around them. "You are wounded," Kara said, breathing hard. "So are you," Xavier replied, noting fresh blood seeping through her bandages. "We are a pair of fools," Kara said, and there was something almost like laughter in her voice despite the death surrounding them. "The best kind," Xavier agreed. The turning point came when Commander Garrett finally brought down the Black Claw war chief. The massive orc fought with terrifying strength, his war axe shattering shields and splitting armor. But Garrett was a veteran of 20 campaigns, and he fought with cold efficiency rather than rage. He let the war chief overextend on a massive swing, then stepped inside his guard and drove his sword up under the ornate skull-painted breastplate. The war chief fell with a crash that seemed to shake the ground. Kara immediately shouted something in Orcish, her voice carrying over the battlefield. Xavier didn't understand the words, but he understood the result. The Black Claw warriors faltered, looking to where their leader had fallen. Some broke and ran immediately. Others tried to rally, but the heart had gone out of their attack. In the other two villages, the Black Claw forces were already in retreat. The coordinated ambush had worked exactly as planned. The raiders who had expected easy prey had instead found themselves outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and leaderless. By midday, the surviving Black Claw warriors were fleeing back toward the canyons, leaving their dead behind. The victory was total, but costly. 15 soldiers had died and twice that number were wounded. Several militiamen had been killed as well. The valley would mourn its dead even as it celebrated survival. Xavier helped with the aftermath, organizing the wounded and ensuring the dead were treated with respect, both human and orc. He saw to it that even the fallen Black Claw warriors were given proper pyres. When some of the militiamen protested burning good wood for orc bodies, Xavier fixed them with a hard stare. "They died in battle," he said. "That earns respect, regardless of what side they fought on." Kara watched him from across the village square, and when their eyes met, he saw approval in her golden gaze. That night, as the valley slowly returned to something like normal, Xavier finally allowed himself to acknowledge the cracked rib and various bruises he had accumulated. Kara's wound had reopened during the fighting, and he insisted on changing her bandages despite her protests. They sat by the fire in his farmhouse, and the silence between them felt different now. They had fought together, bled together, survived together. Something had been forged in that shared battle, something that went beyond simple gratitude or respect. "What will you do now?" Xavier asked as he tied off the fresh bandages. "I do not know," Kara admitted. "I cannot return to the Stone Fist clan. I am traitor to them now. And I cannot stay among humans. Your commander promised me safe passage, but that does not mean the villagers will accept me. They see only orc when they look at me." "Not all of them," Xavier said quietly. Kara met his eyes. "What do you see when you look at me, Xavier Yates?" Xavier took his time answering, knowing the weight of what he was about to say. "I see someone brave, someone who risked everything to save people who would call her enemy, someone who fought beside me when she could barely stand, someone I would like to know better." Kara's breath caught. "You know what you are suggesting. The taboo you would break, I know," Xavier said. "I've spent my life breaking taboos, refusing to kill children, leaving the military, living alone out here because I couldn't stomach the prejudice of the towns." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. Her skin was rough and warm. "Maybe I'm tired of living alone." "Your people would shun you," Kara said, but she didn't pull her hand away. "Call you orc lover, monster lover. You would lose what little acceptance you still have." "I never had much acceptance to begin with," Xavier said. "And I don't care what they call me. I care about this, about you." Kara's hand tightened on his. "I care about you too," she said, the words coming out rough as if forced past her pride. "I should not. I should leave at dawn and never return, but I do not want to. I have never felt, I did not know I could feel this way about a human." "What way?" Xavier asked, even though his heart was hammering and he thought he knew the answer. "Safe," Kara said. "Valued, seen for who I am rather than what I am." She reached up with her free hand and touched his face again, the gesture she had made once before. "You look at me and see Kara, not orc. Not monster, not enemy, just me." Xavier turned his face into her palm, letting his eyes close for a moment. "That's all I've ever wanted too. For someone to see Xavier, not soft heart, not the disgraced captain, not the hermit on the hill, just me." When he opened his eyes, Kara was leaning closer. Her tusks and pointed ears and green skin should have seemed alien, should have triggered all the cultural conditioning about orcs being monsters. Instead, Xavier found her beautiful. The strength in her features, the warmth in her golden eyes, the careful vulnerability in the way she held herself, all of it drew him like a lodestone. They kissed carefully, mindful of her tusks and his beard, finding the angle that worked. It was gentle and tentative, a question rather than a declaration. When they parted, Kara made a soft sound that might have been laughter or surprise or both. "I have never kissed a human before," she said. "I've never kissed an orc before," Xavier replied. "How was it?" "Strange," Kara said honestly. Then she smiled, a real smile that showed her tusks and crinkled her eyes. "Good strange. We should try again to be certain." They did try again, and it was better the second time. They sat by the fire, holding each other carefully around their various injuries, and talked long into the night. Kara spoke of her life with the Stone Fist clan, of her sister who had married into a peaceful clan, only to be slaughtered by Black Claw raiders. Of the anger she had carried after that, the desire for vengeance that had slowly transformed into a determination that no one else, orc or human, would suffer the same fate if she could prevent it. Xavier talked about his years in the border guard, the good men he had served with, and the ones who valued cruelty over honor. He spoke of the day he had been ordered to execute a group of orc prisoners, including children, and how refusing that order had ended his career, but saved his soul. "I have not regretted my choice," he said, "but I have been lonely. I thought I had made peace with that loneliness. Then you collapsed on my doorstep and everything changed." "You changed my life too," Kara said. "You could have left me to die. Many humans would have. Instead you saved me, believed me, rode for 8 days to bring help. You fought beside me when you could have stayed safe in the rear. You see me as a person, not just what my people have done to yours." "Your people haven't done anything to me," Xavier said. "Individuals have done terrible things on both sides, yes. But I won't judge you by what other orcs have done any more than I want to be judged by what other humans have done." Kara rested her head on his shoulder, careful of her wound and his cracked rib. "We are both fools," she said again. "This cannot be easy. There will be many who despise us for being together." "I know," Xavier said, "but I've spent enough of my life alone. If the price of being with you is more disapproval from people I already don't like, that seems like a fair trade." "You are certain?" Kara asked. "You do not need time to consider what you are choosing." Xavier thought about it seriously, wanting to give her an honest answer rather than a romantic one. "I'm certain that I want to try. that I care about you and I think we could build something good together. I'm certain that the way I feel when I look at you is worth fighting for. Beyond that, I think we'll figure it out as we go." Kara lifted her head to look at him. "You truly do not see my tusks and green skin and think monster." "I see your tusks and green skin and think beautiful," Xavier said firmly. "I see your strength and your courage and your compassion, and I think about how lucky I am that you chose my door to collapse at." "I am glad I chose your door," Kara said softly. "I am glad it was you who found me." They held each other until the fire burned low. Then Xavier insisted Kara rest while he dealt with the farm chores he had been neglecting. The goats needed tending and there was wood to chop for winter. Kara offered to help despite her wound, but Xavier refused. "You're still healing," he said firmly. "And I've managed these chores alone for 3 years. I think I can handle one more day." Kara relented, though she watched him from the door as he worked. Xavier found himself very aware of her gaze, wanting to show competence, which was ridiculous. He was a grown man, not some youth trying to impress a potential partner. Except that was exactly what he was doing, he realized with some amusement. Over the following days, a pattern emerged. Kara's wound healed quickly, true to her claim that orcs recovered faster than humans. She began helping around the farm, proving surprisingly good with the goats and excellent at repairs. She had a practical, efficient approach to work that meshed well with Xavier's methodical nature. Commander Garrett visited 3 days after the battle, bringing supplies and news. The Black Claw clan had scattered after their defeat, and scouts reported they were withdrawing from the region entirely. The valley was safe, at least for now. "You did well," Garrett told Xavier. "Both of you," he added, nodding to Kara. "The warning saved hundreds of lives. The council wants to thank you formally." "That's not necessary," Xavier said quickly. "It's politics," Garrett replied. "They want to be seen doing the right thing. Besides, they're offering a reward, 50 gold pieces each. That's not nothing." 50 gold was indeed not nothing. That was nearly a year's income from Xavier's farm, and probably more than Kara had ever possessed. But Xavier could see the tension in Kara's shoulders at the mention of appearing before the village council. "Will she be safe there?" Xavier asked bluntly. Garrett's expression turned serious. "I'll have soldiers present. No one will harm her, not after what she did. But I won't lie to you, Xavier. There are people in the valley who aren't happy about trusting an orc, reward or not. You'll both face questions and stares." "We can handle stares," Xavier said, glancing at Kara. She nodded, her jaw set with determination. The council meeting was held in the largest village in the same hall where they had planned the defense. A crowd had gathered, and Xavier noted the mix of expressions. Some faces showed genuine gratitude, others showed suspicion and hostility. Several people made protective signs when Kara entered, as if warding off evil spirits. The head counselor, an older man named Thomas, called the meeting to order. He gave a speech about the threat they had faced and how close they had come to disaster. Then he called Kara forward. She walked to the front of the hall with her head high, every inch the warrior despite wearing simple borrowed clothes rather than armor. Xavier stood with her, making his support clear. "Kara of the Stone Fist clan," Thomas said, "you brought us warning of the attack at great personal cost. You provided intelligence that allowed us to defend our homes and save countless lives. The council wishes to formally thank you and present you with a reward of 50 gold pieces." A murmur ran through the crowd, some approving, some not. Thomas raised his hand for silence. "Additionally," he continued, "the council wishes to grant you official permission to reside in the valley, should you choose to do so. You will be under the protection of valley law and entitled to the same rights as any resident." The murmur grew louder. Someone in the back shouted, "She's an orc. You want us to live with orcs now." "I want us to live with people who save lives," Thomas said firmly. "What are you, someone who judges people by their actions or by the color of their skin?" That shut the heckler up, though discontent still rippled through the crowd. Thomas presented Kara with a heavy pouch of coins and an official document granting her residency. She accepted both with a dignified nod. "I thank the council," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "I did what I believed was right. I could not stand by and let innocent people die, human or orc. That is all." Xavier was then called forward and given his own reward and an official pardon for any past grievances with the military. Garrett had clearly put in a word on his behalf. Thomas shook his hand warmly. "You've done the valley a great service, Captain," Thomas said, deliberately using Xavier's old rank. "We're lucky to have you among us." As they left the hall, they had to pass through the gathered crowd. Most people made way quietly, though a few made hostile gestures or muttered insults under their breath. One young man, barely more than a boy, spat at Kara's feet. "Orc trash," he said. "We don't want your kind here." Xavier stepped forward, his hand going to his sword hilt, but Kara caught his arm. She looked at the young man with calm golden eyes. "I understand your anger," she said. "Orcs have hurt humans. Perhaps orcs have hurt you or your family. I cannot undo the past. I can only try to make the future better. If you cannot accept that, I am sorry." The young man looked taken aback by her calm response. He flushed red and looked away, muttering something that might have been an apology. Kara moved on without waiting for a clearer response. "You handled that well," Xavier said when they were out of earshot. "I have faced worse than words," Kara said. "And he is young. Perhaps in time he will learn that not all orcs are the same, just as I have learned that not all humans are the same." They returned to Xavier's farm with their reward money and official papers. That evening, they sat at Xavier's small table and discussed what came next. "You have residency now," Xavier said. "You can build a life here if you want. Buy land, start a farm, establish yourself." "Or I could stay here," Kara said, meeting his eyes. "With you, if you want that." Xavier's heart beat faster. They had been carefully avoiding defining what was happening between them, living day to day. But now the question was on the table, clear and unavoidable. "I want that," he said. "I want you here. I want to wake up with you beside me and work the farm together and build a life together. But I need you to be certain, Kara. Once you make that choice, people will talk. They'll call us every name they can think of. It won't be easy." "Nothing worth having is easy," Kara said. "I am certain, Xavier. I have nowhere else I belong anymore. The Stone Fist clan has cast me out. I cannot return to orc lands, but more than that, I do not want to be anywhere else. I want to be here with you." Xavier reached across the table and took her hands. "Then stay. Please stay." "I will stay," Kara said, "for as long as you will have me." "That might be a very long time," Xavier warned, smiling. "Good," Kara said, smiling back. "I am difficult to get rid of anyway." They used part of their reward money to improve the farm. Xavier's small farmhouse had been built for one person, so they expanded it, adding a second room and improving the barn. Kara proved to be skilled at construction, and they worked side by side throughout the warm summer months. Word spread through the valley that the orc woman was living with Xavier Yates. As predicted, people talked. Some of the talk was merely curious, but much of it was hostile. A few farmers refused to trade with Xavier anymore. The priest in the nearest village gave a sermon about the sanctity of human purity that was clearly aimed at Xavier and Kara, though he didn't name them directly. They endured the gossip and hostility with patience. Xavier continued to trade fairly with those who would deal with him, and Kara made herself useful wherever she could. When a neighboring farm's barn roof collapsed in a summer storm, Kara volunteered to help rebuild it. The farmer was hesitant at first, but Kara worked from dawn to dusk for 3 days, asking nothing in return. By the end, the farmer's opinion had shifted. "She's all right, that orc," he told Xavier. "Works harder than most humans I know." Slowly, carefully, acceptance began to grow. Not universal acceptance, but enough. A few families started trading with them regularly. Children, less bound by prejudice than their parents, would sometimes approach Kara with curious questions about orc life. She answered them patiently, showing them how to braid hair in the warrior style or explaining the meanings of different orcish symbols. Autumn came, bringing harvest time. Xavier and Kara worked together to bring in their crops and prepare for winter. They had settled into a comfortable domestic rhythm, their initial awkwardness replaced by an easy partnership. Kara still slept with a knife under her pillow, old habits from dangerous times, but she slept peacefully in Xavier's arms. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Xavier built up the fire high and pulled out the good bottle of wine he had been saving. Kara raised an eyebrow at the special treatment. "What are we celebrating?" she asked. 6 months, Xavier said. 6 months since you collapsed at my door. 6 months since my life changed completely. Kara's expression softened. "Has it been a good change?" "The best change," Xavier said firmly. He poured them both wine and raised his cup. "To chance meetings and brave messengers. To men who help strangers and believe in doing what is right," Kara responded, raising her own cup. They drank, and then Xavier set down his cup with the air of a man about to do something significant. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, setting it on the table between them. It was a ring, simple and elegant, made of iron and silver twisted together. Kara stared at it, then at Xavier, her golden eyes wide. "Is that you?" she started, seeming lost for words for the first time since Xavier had known her. "I know we can't marry in any official sense," Xavier said. "No priest would perform the ceremony, and the law wouldn't recognize it anyway. But I don't care about official recognition. I care about you, about us. I want to pledge myself to you in the way that matters. Not because of what anyone else thinks, but because I love you and I want to spend my life with you." Kara's hands were trembling slightly as she picked up the ring, examining the intertwined iron and silver. "What does this symbolize?" she asked, her voice rough. "Iron for strength and silver for beauty," Xavier said. "Twisted together like our lives have become. 2 different metals that are stronger together than apart. I had it made by the smith in the village. Took him a while to agree to make it, but eventually your reputation for hard work convinced him." "You love me," Kara said, as if testing the words. "You truly love me." "I truly love you," Xavier confirmed. "I know we come from different worlds, different peoples. I know there will always be those who judge us, but I have never been happier than I am with you. I have never felt more myself, more at home than when I am by your side. So yes, I love you, Kara, and I want to be with you for whatever time we have." Kara set the ring down carefully and stood, pulling Xavier to his feet. She took his face in both her hands, her golden eyes searching his. "I love you too," she said. "I did not know I could love like this. My people do not. We are not taught to value such softness. But you have shown me that love is not soft. It is the strongest thing there is. It is what gives us courage to stand against the world. And I do love you, Xavier Yates. I will wear your ring and be yours as you will be mine." She kissed him then, fierce and claiming, and Xavier wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. When they finally parted, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the intertwined metals gleaming in the firelight. They made their own vows that night, standing before the fire with no witnesses but the flames and the stars outside. Xavier vowed to stand beside Kara through whatever challenges came, to honor her strength and cherish her vulnerability, to build a life worthy of the courage she had shown. Kara vowed to be his partner and companion, to bring her full self to their union, to face the world together rather than alone. When they finished, they sealed their vows with another kiss, and Xavier felt something click into place in his chest. This was right. This was home. Winter settled over the valley, and Xavier and Kara weathered it together. The farmhouse was warm and well-stocked. They spent the long dark evenings by the fire, talking or reading or simply enjoying each other's company. Kara was teaching Xavier some orcish, both the spoken language and the rune writing. Xavier was teaching Kara to read human script better, expanding her vocabulary beyond the practical words she had learned. "Your language is so complicated," Kara complained one evening, frowning at a book. "Why do you need so many words for the same thing?" says the woman whose language has 17 different words for types of honor, Xavier replied, grinning. "That is because honor is complicated," Kara said seriously. "It has many facets. Your language should reflect important distinctions." "And we think the same about other concepts," Xavier said. "It's just cultural difference. Neither way is wrong." Kara considered that, then nodded. "You are right. I sometimes forget that different does not mean inferior. My people, we are taught that orc ways are the only right ways. It is hard to unlearn such thinking." "You're doing well," Xavier said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Better than most humans would in your position." "I have good teacher," Kara said, her accent thickening slightly as it did when she was tired or emotional. She set the book aside and moved to sit beside Xavier, tucking herself against his side. "I am content here. That surprises me. I was warrior, always moving, always fighting. Now I am farmer, staying in one place, building rather than destroying, and I am happy." "I'm happy too," Xavier said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Happier than I ever expected to be." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white. Inside, all was warm and peaceful. The peace was interrupted a few weeks later by an unexpected visitor. Xavier was in the barn tending the goats when he heard Kara call out a warning. He grabbed his sword and ran outside to find a lone orc standing at the edge of the property. The orc was male, heavily built, wearing the distinctive leather and bone armor of the Stone Fist clan. Kara stood between the visitor and the farmhouse, her spear held ready. She and the male orc were speaking in rapid orcish, their voices sharp with tension. Xavier approached carefully, trying to gauge the threat level. The male orc noticed him and switched to accented human speech. "You are the human she lives with, the one called Xavier?" "I am," Xavier said, hand on his sword hilt but not drawing. "Who are you?" "I am Throck, clan brother to Kara," the orc said. "I have come to speak with her." "You cast me out," Kara said in human speech, presumably for Xavier's benefit. "You called me traitor and said I was dead to the clan. Why come now?" "Because I was wrong," Throck said bluntly. "We were wrong. The elders have spent these months discussing what you did. The warning you brought, the battle you helped humans win, it has had consequences." "What consequences?" Kara demanded. "The Black Claw clan is broken," Throck said. "They scattered after their defeat and have not regrouped. Without their threat, 2 smaller clans have sued for peace with the Stone Fist. They wish to form alliance, to try the path of cooperation rather than endless raiding." He paused. "Your actions showed that there can be another way, that not all conflicts must end in slaughter." Kara lowered her spear slightly, surprise clear on her face. "The elders said this. They approve of what I did." "Not approve," Throck said carefully. "But they acknowledge that you may have been right to do it. They say you may return to the clan if you wish. You would be welcomed back. Your exile is lifted." Silence fell. Xavier felt his heart clench. This was what Kara had lost when she chose to warn the valley. Her family, her clan, her entire identity as an orc. Now it was being offered back to her. "There are conditions," Throck continued. "You would have to leave the human. The elders will forgive your past actions, but they will not accept you bringing a human into clan lands. You must choose, clan or him." Kara stood very still for a long moment. Xavier wanted to speak, to tell her he would understand if she chose her clan, but he held his silence. This was her decision to make. "No," Kara said finally. Throck blinked. "No, you refuse to return." "I refuse to leave Xavier," Kara said firmly. "He is my family now. This is my home. I gave up the clan for what I believed was right. I will not give up love for the same reason. If the elders cannot accept that, then I will remain in exile." "You would choose a human over your own people?" Throck asked, clearly shocked. "I choose the person who sees me for who I am, not what I am," Kara said. "I choose the person who stood beside me when I had nothing, who gave me a home when I was cast out. I choose love over duty, Throck. That is my choice." Throck looked between Kara and Xavier, something like understanding dawning on his face. "I see," he said quietly. "The elders feared you would say this. They sent me hoping I could convince you otherwise." "You cannot," Kara said. "But thank you for coming, clan brother. Tell the elders I bear no ill will. I hope the alliance with the smaller clans proves fruitful. I hope the Stone Fist finds peace. But I have found my own peace here, and I will not abandon it." Throck nodded slowly. "I will tell them, but know this, Kara. You will always be Stone Fist in my eyes. Exile or not, you are clan. If you ever need aid, you have only to send word." "Thank you," Kara said, and Xavier heard the emotion in her voice. "That means more than you know." Throck turned to Xavier. "You are the human who would not kill orc children, the one called Soft Heart." "I am," Xavier confirmed. "Take care of her," Throck said. "She is worth 10 warriors. Do not make her regret choosing you." "I won't," Xavier promised. "I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of that choice." Throck grunted, something that might have been approval. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the winter forest as silently as he had come. Kara stood watching until he was gone, then slowly lowered her spear. Xavier approached carefully and wrapped his arms around her from behind. She leaned back into him, and he felt her shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "I chose you," Kara said. "Over everything I was raised to value, over clan and honor and everything I knew, I chose you." "You did," Xavier confirmed. "And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it." Kara turned in his arms, her golden eyes bright with unshed tears. "I do not regret it. Not for one moment. But I needed to say it out loud, needed to make the choice explicitly. Now it is done. You are my clan, this farm is my home, that is the truth." "Then welcome home," Xavier said softly and kissed her. They stood in the snow, holding each other, and Xavier felt a sense of rightness settle over him. Whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. That was all that mattered. Spring arrived slowly, the snow melting to reveal the muddy ground beneath. Xavier and Kara prepared for planting season, organizing seeds and repairing the plow. The farm was thriving under their joint efforts, and they were planning to expand the vegetable garden and add more goats. Commander Garrett visited in early spring, bringing news from the fort. "Thought you should know," he said over tea in their kitchen. "The Stone Fist clan has formally allied with the valley settlements. They've agreed to trade routes and mutual defense pacts. It's unprecedented." "That's good news," Xavier said, glancing at Kara. "It is," Garrett agreed. And it started because of what you two did. The battle last year, the warning, all of it. You showed both sides that cooperation was possible. Now others are following that example. I am glad, Kara said. Less fighting means less death. That can only be good. There's more, Garrett said. The council wants to know if you would be willing to serve as liaison between the Valley and the Stone Fist clan. They trust you, Kara, and they trust Xavier's judgment. The position would come with a salary and official status. Xavier and Kara exchanged glances. We would need to discuss it, Xavier said. Of course, Garrett said. Take your time. But I think it could be good work. Important work. And it might help others see that humans and orcs can work together peacefully. After Garrett left, Xavier and Kara talked long into the night about the offer. It would mean traveling sometimes, leaving the farm for brief periods. It would also mean putting themselves forward as examples of human-orc cooperation, which could attract both positive and negative attention. What do you think? Xavier asked. I think it could help prevent future conflicts, Kara said thoughtfully. If we can build bridges between our peoples, maybe others will not have to face the choices we faced. Maybe there will be less hatred, less fear. That's a lot of responsibility, Xavier pointed out. We have carried responsibility before, Kara replied, and we did not fail. Why should we fail now? Xavier smiled. When you put it that way, it seems obvious we should accept. Then we accept, Kara said decisively. We will be bridge builders. It is good work. They sent word to Garrett that they would take the position. Over the following months, they traveled between the Valley settlements and Stone Fist clan lands, facilitating trade negotiations and cultural exchanges. It was difficult work, fraught with misunderstandings and prejudices on both sides. But slowly, progress was made. Xavier found himself in the strange position of being respected by many of the orcs, who valued his directness, and the fact that he had stood beside Kara in battle. Some humans still viewed him with suspicion, but others began to see him as a visionary, someone brave enough to build a better future. Kara thrived in the role. Her knowledge of both cultures and her practical, no-nonsense approach to problem-solving made her an effective mediator. She was particularly good at cutting through political posturing to identify real concerns and workable solutions. 1 year after the battle that had brought them together, the Valley held a celebration to mark the anniversary of their victory and the new peace that had followed. Xavier and Kara were invited as guests of honor, which was both gratifying and nerve-wracking. The celebration was held in the same village where the council had awarded them their original reward. This time, the crowd that gathered was much friendlier. Children ran up to Kara asking for stories about orc warriors. Young farmers asked Xavier for advice about expanding their herds. Several people thanked them for their work as liaisons. There were still hostile faces in the crowd, people who would never accept an orc living among them or a human who loved one. But they were fewer now and quieter. The tide was turning. As the sun set and bonfires were lit, Xavier and Kara stood at the edge of the celebration, watching people dance and laugh. A few brave souls had even invited Stone Fist orcs to the celebration, and they stood in small groups, conversing awkwardly but peacefully with human neighbors. We did this, Kara said softly. Not alone, but we started it. That day you chose to help a dying orc on your doorstep, you started all of this. You started it when you chose to warn people who called you enemy, Xavier replied. I just helped. We helped each other, Kara said. She took his hand, the ring he had given her gleaming on her finger. And we will keep helping each other. That is what love means, yes. That's exactly what it means, Xavier agreed. A young girl approached them then, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. She looked up at Kara with wide, curious eyes. "Is it true you're married to him?" she asked, pointing at Xavier. "In all ways that matter, yes," Kara said seriously. "But you're an orc," the girl said, puzzled but not hostile. "I am," Kara confirmed. "And he's a human," the girl continued, working through the logic. "He is," Kara agreed. The girl thought about this for a moment, then shrugged. "My papa says love is love, and anyone who loves someone is lucky, so I guess you're both lucky." "We are very lucky," Xavier said, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for reminding us." The girl skipped off, and Xavier and Kara looked at each other. In that child's simple acceptance, they saw hope for the future. A future where maybe, just maybe, human and orc children would grow up without the hatred and prejudice that had defined previous generations. "We should start a family," Kara said suddenly. Xavier's eyes widened. "A family? You mean children?" "I mean children," Kara confirmed. "I do not know if it is possible, human and orc, but if it is, I would like to try. And if it is not, we could foster children who need homes. There will be orphans from the old conflicts. They will need people who understand both human and orc ways." Xavier pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with love for this fierce, practical, compassionate woman who had changed his entire world. "Yes," he said. "Yes to all of it. Family, children, building a future together. Yes." They sealed the agreement with a kiss, there in the firelight with the celebration continuing around them. When they parted, they were both smiling. The future was uncertain, as futures always are. There would be more challenges, more prejudice to overcome, more bridges to build. But they would face it all together, hand in hand, building their family and their life one day at a time. 2 years after that celebration, Kara gave birth to a daughter. The pregnancy had been difficult, and there had been times when Xavier feared he would lose both wife and child. But Kara was strong, and their daughter proved to be just as stubborn about entering the world as her mother was about everything else. They named her Lena, a name that worked in both human and orcish tongues. She had her mother's green skin and pointed ears, but her father's brown eyes. Her tusks were so small as to be barely noticeable, and she had a loud, healthy cry that announced her displeasure at any inconvenience. Xavier held his daughter for the first time and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. This tiny, perfect being was half him and half Kara, a physical embodiment of the love they shared and the bridge they had built between their peoples. "She is beautiful," Kara said, exhausted but triumphant. "She's perfect," Xavier agreed. "Like her mother." "She has your stubbornness," Kara said. "Pretty sure she gets that from you," Xavier replied, grinning. News of Lena's birth spread quickly through both human and orc communities. She was, as far as anyone knew, the first child born of a human-orc union in this region. Some viewed her as an abomination. Many more viewed her as a symbol of hope, proof that the two peoples could build a shared future. Gifts arrived from unexpected sources. The Stone Fist clan sent traditional orc blessing tokens to protect the child from evil spirits. The village council sent a cradle carved from oak and a promise that Lena would be protected under valley law. Commander Garrett sent a letter of congratulation and a silver rattle that had been in his family for generations. Xavier and Kara raised their daughter with love and patience, teaching her both human and orc customs. They told her stories from both cultures and taught her to be proud of her mixed heritage. Lena grew up speaking 2 languages fluently and comfortable in both communities. When Lena was 3 years old, Kara became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and they welcomed twin boys they named Marcus and Gran. Marcus favored his human father in appearance, with only slightly greenish skin and tiny tusks. Gran looked more orc, with brighter green skin and more prominent tusks, but had his father's brown eyes like his sister. The farmhouse expanded again to accommodate the growing family. Xavier and Kara worked hard to support their children while continuing their liaison work. It was exhausting and rewarding in equal measure, watching their children grow up in a world that was slowly becoming more accepting. One evening, when Lena was 10 and the twins were 7, the family gathered around the dinner table as they did every night. Lena was telling a story about something that had happened at the village school, where she was one of only 2 orc children. And then Thomas said I was a monster because of my green skin, Lena said matter-of-factly. So I told him that my mother saved his grandfather's life in the battle, and that if she was a monster, she was a monster who did more good than he ever would. Teacher said I was right and made Thomas apologize. Xavier and Kara exchanged glances, pride and concern mixing. How did that make you feel? Kara asked. When he called you monster, Lena shrugged. Sad for him. Papa always says people who hate usually learned it from someone else. I think Thomas learned it from his father, who still doesn't like orcs. So I feel sad that Thomas is learning to hate instead of learning to understand. That's very wise, Xavier said, reaching over to ruffle her hair. More wise than many adults. I learned it from you, Lena said simply. You and Mama. You taught us that different isn't scary, it's just different. And that what matters is how people act, not what they look like. Marcus piped up, his voice enthusiastic. At the Stone Fist gathering, Elder Throck said I was a bridge walker, someone who can walk in 2 worlds. He said that's a gift, not a curse. Elder Throck is right, Kara said. You are all bridge walkers. You carry the best of both peoples in you. That is indeed a gift. Will there always be people who hate us for being mixed? Gron asked quietly. He was the most sensitive of the 3 children, prone to taking things to heart. Xavier knelt beside his youngest son's chair, meeting his eyes seriously. I won't lie to you. Yes, there probably will always be some people who don't understand or who fear what's different. But there will also always be people who see you for who you are, who value your unique perspective and gifts, and those people matter more than the ones who hate. Plus, Kara added, you have each other, and you have us. We are family, and family stands together. Anyone who hates you will have to face all of us, and we are formidable. The children laughed at that, and the serious moment passed. They finished dinner and cleaned up together, then spent the evening as they often did, with Xavier reading human stories while Kara told orcish tales. The children would fall asleep to the sound of their parents' voices, safe and loved. Years passed in this way. The children grew, the farm prospered, and the peace between humans and orcs deepened. There were still conflicts, still prejudice and fear to overcome. But the tide had turned definitively. Trade routes that had once been deadly were now peaceful. Villages that had once viewed all orcs as enemies now had orc trading partners and allies. Xavier and Kara's liaison work expanded as other regions heard about the valley's success and requested their assistance. They traveled more, always returning home to their children and their farm. It was a good life, full and meaningful. When Xavier was 50 and Kara 45, they decided to retire from liaison work to focus on the farm and their family. Lena had become a liaison herself, following in her parents' footsteps with natural talent and dedication. The twins had chosen different paths, Marcus as a smith and Gron as a teacher, but both worked to build bridges in their own ways. Xavier and Kara sat on the porch of their expanded farmhouse one summer evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their grandchildren, Lena's 2 daughters, played in the yard under the watchful eye of their mother. You ever regret it? Xavier asked quietly. Giving up your clan, choosing this life. Kara looked at him with those golden eyes that still made his heart skip after all these years. Never, she said firmly. Not once. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. Love, family, purpose. I have everything that matters. I feel the same, Xavier said. That day you collapsed at my door was the luckiest day of my life. You saved my life that day, Kara said. You saved mine too, Xavier replied. In every way that matters. You gave me purpose again, showed me that one person's choice can change the world. You made me believe in hope again. Kara leaned her head on his shoulder and they sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play. The oldest granddaughter had bright green skin and her grandfather's brown eyes. The youngest looked more human but had the pointed ears and small tusks of her grandmother. Both were beautiful, both were loved, both were living proof that different peoples could build a shared future. The sun set fully, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Xavier and Kara remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts entwined. They had built a life together from the ashes of conflict and prejudice. They had created a family that embodied the peace they had worked for. They had shown that love could bridge any divide. And as the stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal, Xavier and Kara knew that their story would continue through their children and grandchildren, rippling out into a future neither of them could fully see but both of them had helped to build. It was a good legacy, a proud legacy. It was enough. Many years later, when Xavier was old and his health was failing, he lay in the bed he had shared with Kara for decades. Their children and grandchildren surrounded him, and even some great-grandchildren, the youngest of whom was only a few months old. The room was full of love and the mingled grief and gratitude that comes at the end of a long, well-lived life. Kara sat beside him, holding his hand as she had through countless trials and triumphs. Her hair was more gray than black now, and her face was lined with age, but her golden eyes were still fierce and bright. "I'm sorry to leave you," Xavier said, his voice weak but clear. "Do not apologize," Kara said firmly. "We had more years together than I ever dared hope for. We built a family, changed our world, lived fully and loved completely. That is everything." "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," Xavier said, collapsing at my door that day. "You were the best thing that happened to me too," Kara replied. "Opening your door, seeing me as a person rather than a monster. You changed my entire world with that choice." "We changed the world together," Xavier said. He looked around at his gathered family, at the beautiful tapestry of human and orc features, at the love that connected them all. "Look at what we built." "I see it," Kara said softly, "and it is beautiful. You made something beautiful, Xavier Yates. Never doubt that." Xavier smiled, peaceful and content. He squeezed Kara's hand one last time, and then his breathing slowed and stopped. He passed quietly, surrounded by love at the end of a life well lived. Kara sat with him for a long time after, holding his hand, mourning the loss even as she celebrated all they had shared. Their children and grandchildren mourned with her, supporting each other through the grief. Xavier was buried on a hillside overlooking the farm, beneath an oak tree he had planted decades ago. Both human and orc customs were observed in his funeral, reflecting the life he had lived bridging two worlds. Leaders from both communities attended, paying respect to the man who had shown them a better way forward. Kara lived for several more years after Xavier's death, continuing to work the farm with help from her family. She was there to see her youngest great-grandchildren take their first steps, to celebrate her children's achievements, to watch the world continue to change and grow more accepting. When her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, joining Xavier in the hillside beneath the oak tree. Their graves were marked with a single stone that bore both human and orcish blessings, a final symbol of the unity they had embodied in life. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued their legacy, living in a world that was kinder and more accepting because of the choices two people had made decades earlier. The farm remained in the family, maintained through generations, a living reminder of what could be built when people chose love over fear, hope over hate, courage over comfort. And so the story that began with an orc messenger collapsing at a door and a human soldier choosing compassion over indifference rippled out through time, shaping the world in ways both large and small. It became a story that grandparents told to children, a tale of courage and love and the power of individual choices to change history. The warning had been delivered and read, yes, but more than that, it had been believed and acted upon. And in that believing and acting, two people had found each other and built something beautiful and lasting. They had proven that different peoples could build a shared future, one act of compassion and courage at a time. It was a good story. It was a true story, and it mattered. The end came not with fanfare but with peace, as all good stories should. Xavier and Kara's legacy lived on in every bridge built between human and orc communities, in every mixed family that faced the world with pride rather than shame, in every person who chose understanding over prejudice. Their story became legend, but before it was legend, it was simply the truth of two people who loved each other and changed their world because of it. The farmhouse still stood generations later, preserved as a historical site. Young people, human and orc and those of mixed heritage, would visit and stand in the room where Kara had first been brought after collapsing at the door. They would read the accounts of the battle, study the peace treaties that followed, and marvel at what had been achieved. But more than the historical significance, they would feel the love that had permeated that house. They would sense the echoes of laughter and tears, of family dinners and quiet evenings, of lives fully lived and deeply shared. They would understand that the real miracle was not the peace treaties or the bridge building, though those mattered. The real miracle was the choice two people made to see each other as individuals worthy of love, to build a life together despite every obstacle their societies placed in their path. And standing in that house, many young people would feel inspired to make similar choices in their own lives, to choose love over fear, to build bridges instead of walls, to believe that their own actions, however small they might seem, could ripple out and change the world. That was the true legacy of Xavier and Kara. Not just the peace they helped build, but the example they set. The proof that one person's choice to help a stranger, to believe an unlikely warning, to open their heart to someone different, could ultimately transform everything. The sun continued to rise and set over the valley, seasons turned, years passed, but the story endured. It endured because it was true, because it mattered, because it showed what was possible when people chose to be better than the prejudices they were taught. And in that endurance was hope. Hope that every generation could build on what came before, could make their world a little bit kinder, a little bit more accepting, a little bit more loving. Xavier and Kara had shown the way. It was up to everyone who came after to continue the journey they had begun. The story was over, but its effects rippled on into an unknowable future, carried forward by every person who heard it and chose to believe that they too could make a difference. That was the real ending, the one that never truly ended at all. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.